Well, it's impossible to boil it down to one key challenge, Marcello, because, I mean, you look at the environment and it's just so extraordinarily complex and turbulent over the last 3 years. So I look at it in layers. So you've got the strategic layer, and so the boards of organizations around the world, they're looking at those big strategic decisions. What do we acquire? What do we divest? Which markets are we in? What's our product portfolio going to look like? What is our risk appetite? How's that changing? And that's at a strategic level. Then you've got the sort of the larger changes that they're trying to put through in the meat of their business, which is how do we do transformation, and those programs, they look as though they should be quite short-lived, but they just seem to be trundling on and taking a long, long time because the legacy they're trying to unpick is so complex. And you've got the incubators starting up, and you've got sort of lots of sort of, the new startups there. But when it really comes down to it, the vast chunk of what we really need to focus on today is how to create value for customers. And most of these organizations' revenue comes from existing processes. And so whilst we're waiting for the transformational cavalry to come over the hill, you really need to be focusing on what you can unleash in terms of customer value, whether that's value directly for customers, the customer experience, whether it's for your people in terms of making it an easier work environment, more interesting, more dynamic work, whether it's better for regulators and stakeholders, or whether it's just better from a productivity perspective. So you've got this huge chunk of opportunity that's just sitting there, and whilst the sexy stuff may be on the outside, the vast tranche of value that can be created in the short to medium term is sort of in plain sight. With the traditional tools, we've tried to do this over the last sort of, God knows, couple of decades. You can't see the complexity. You can't see where it's hidden. And when you do sort of, we put in some, I think 400 RPA bots in about 2014, and we created an extraordinarily complex environment, which was far more complex than it was before, and we yielded about half an FTE per bot. And because we just didn't understand, because how we were doing it so sort of quickly, and not without and trying to take that sort of advantage of that whole end-to-end view, because we just couldn't see what was there in totality. It works at a couple of different levels, Marcello. Each of these large organizations, they have their investment slate process, what goes on every year. And in a very polite way, it's a bun fight. Because it is, one of the quotes we've got recently about this is, even when you've got the data, it's subjective. And every rewards system in an organization, it rewards change. No one gets an outperform on their scorecard for just keeping the lights on. So you have to put your case up to get money, to get funding, so that you can get a bonus at the end of the year. So what it means is you get this whole heap of dross put forward, and someone's got to try and sift through it to find the nuggets of value. And the issue is we've never really had the data to quantify where that value is. If someone might have done a happy path, that might represent 10% of the transactional flow through a particular process. But that's not where the value is. That's where the value trap is in the 90% that you can't actually see and quantify. So at the moment, it's an incredibly political process at the top end when you go through the investment slate. And it is a political process as opposed to a data-driven process. There's some numbers in there, but that's just really to dress up the politics. And then when you go down to the business unit level, it's what can I achieve that I can control, which is where you get into this hyper-fragmentation. Because I've got a few spare dollars in my budget. I can get rid of a few people, and I've got a mate over in Bangalore who can get the server where he can unlock the server. We can load the software on it, and we can just start going. And so then you just actually perpetuate the problem. So at the moment, it's extraordinarily difficult to do this in a strategic way because you don't have the data at the top, because you can't see the complexity, you can't see where the value is. And you've got this reward system that is just driving change, even though it's not the right sort of change. So I think it's a huge opportunity for the tools, like we've been talking about, saying, show me the data so I can make an objective decision, as opposed to I rely on the politics of it. From a business perspective, that it's the speeding up of that time to value barrier. So when you sort of get your log, you load your data, you see your model as it is, you've got the cost attributes attached to it, and then you can simulate that. And then you can say, okay, well, if I take this out, what's going to happen to that control, but what's going to happen to my time to deliver? And I can answer those questions based on real data, 100% of the data, not a sample, not a sweet happy path type approach. I can do that in minutes, not months. I can make that so easy. I can make those decisions myself. And I have objective data, which I can then go and talk to my peers in the mortgages, in KYC, in sort of structured term finance, in payments, and we can use a common language. Whereas at the moment, it's, I'll just pull holes in whatever data you pull out because you've only got this tiny little speck, and my job is to destroy your case so my case gets up. And then when you've got a common platform to actually help understand where the value is, and you act on behalf of the organization, not personal agenda. I don't want to have to go to the RPA team. I don't want to have to go to the process mining team. I don't want to have to go to the sort of the mainframe or the sort of the core banking platform team. I want to go to one area, and I don't want the conversation that I used to have with a risk guy saying, don't tell me what's just happened. I want you to tell me what's about to happen so I can do something about it. And it's those conversations which, when you start to bring these technologies together, you can enable them, but the sort of the workforce model has to follow suit as well. And the cost allocation model about how you actually charge the business, because one of the reasons why so many of these things end up sort of in little sort of sheltered workshops scattered around sort of the far-flung corners of the empire is because, technology going to charge 25 times more than I can just get Jim around the corner to do it for me. And he'll charge me $5.50, not realizing the inherent cost. So that cost model, once again, of how it's delivered and making that transparent is a key part of enabling the whole package to create the value for the business leaders and the process owners to move forward with. One of the things in terms of where you select your processes, the common thing is to go for your core processes. The big things that are earning you revenue, that's where you start because that's where you think the most value is.
So Nigel, what's a core process?
So core process, one of the things that creates revenue basically for customer-oriented revenue, that is a main thing that you sell as an organization, whether that's a mortgage, whether it's in banking, whether it's just opening a savings account, or in taking out an insurance premium, or if you go and buy a product, etc., from the supermarket. That's the core process to deliver that product to the customer. And that's typically where people want to focus because that's where all your manufacturing resources are tied up, or your cost is tied up. You only get revenue when the sale is actually completed, etc. So you need to be really good at those things. But you've also got these support processes like the risk, the finance, the property, and the procurement, and all those sorts of things. And you've got management processes like how you actually run your business. And it's really common to focus just on the management processes, on the core processes. But if you think about what organizations have been doing over the last 5 years, digital transformation, a great thing. So we need lots of people who understand how to transform our mortgages, how to transform our KYC, whatever the case may be. Well, one of the critical things you actually need is technology resources. And so that acquisition of resource and onboarding resource was a real constraint. No one could get coders. No one could get developers a few years ago. And it's a bit different now. There's a few more on the market in the last couple of weeks. But you couldn't get them. Now, no one would think of going and automating that type of process or looking at that process. But because the tools make it so quick and so straightforward, you can look at your business differently. You say, yes, I still need to improve the processes that create the core value, but some of those support processes which provide the linkages and that enable them, or the budget planning process, which seems to chew up the vast majority of management time over like a 9-month period, you can do that because you have the data and it's much faster to actually to look at it now than it would have been traditionally. No one will be able to put up a business case 5 to 10 years ago to look at those processes the way you can do it now with the pace you can. In my sort of banking days when I used to run ops, I just saw it as an operational support tool. I could see it from so many different perspectives. It would help from a risk and compliance component. It would help me in those sort of day-to-day interactions when stuff's blown up and I need to still need to get my payments out by cut-off time. How am I best going to do that? How can you just give me just half an hour more notice will actually help, and then what decisions are available to me? And then there's everything that then leads into the whole improvement cycle of making it so much easier to see where the incremental value can come from, given that sort of as a from a BAU perspective, you are there to to hold the thing together until the transformation happens. And so our transformation was just going way, way, way beyond its sort of expected life cycle, but we were still expected to deliver the benefits from the transformation just through BAU change. Now, it's extraordinarily hard to do it at that time, sort of 6, 7 years ago. It would have been so much easier with this type of tool set because, as I say, just the time to actually establish where to look, where to go hunting, where the sort of the real issues are. I was talking to a colleague the other day who, one of the greatest improvement people I ever had working for me at NAB was a debottlenecker, and he was a bit like, he used to come to me every week like a puppy dog. He used to like drop his offering in front of me, and it'd be another half an FTE of capacity that he'd found, and it was great, you know, because I had no idea how he'd do this. He used to do it at one of the sort of cheese and butter factories, and then one day he dropped his half an FTE, and a couple of days later we lost $500,000 because that person was in charge of a key control. Because I couldn't see it. I couldn't see that what part of the process he was sort of taking that resource away from and changing was going to unleash that sort of effect. Now, with the tools we have available at our disposal now, I will be able to see that because I can look at it from all the different perspectives. I can look at it from the customer experience perspective. I can look at it from my productivity, from what's good for my people, what's good for our risk and our regulators. It was just too hard to do it sort of 15 years ago. First of all, just doing what you're doing, creating value and showcasing it, marketing it, getting it out there so people can see it, so you create the buzz of what's capable. You've got to push on an open door. You've got to find the people who will welcome you in and let you have the benefits, let you claim the benefits so that you can say, this is a benefit of this sort of tool, this is a technique, as opposed to those people who get you to do all the work and then they say, oh, we're putting that on the back burner for the next sort of 3 years, which is a pain in the butt. So you've got to build your alliances with the right people. The other part, I guess, coming back to when you haven't got workflow-enabled projects, and part of the pain that you're aware of from some of the work I'm doing is this ruthless filtering process you have to do because everybody wants to try and get their bonus, they're going to put some absolute rubbish forward. You need to be able to triage it and filter it out really, really quickly because I'm assuming you just can't do it, with this sort of stuff, just not yet. So be sort of pretty brutal on that. And then, but as I say, just tap as many of the marketing sources. I think there is no capacity cap on resources if the business is prepared to pay for it. If that's in place, that's a great model because lots of the centre of excellences I've seen, they've got fixed capacity and there might be $10 million worth of benefit out there, but I've only got 3.5 FTEs to deliver it, and 2 of them have got a maternity leave and 1's sick. So, that sort of nonsense, I think there are mechanics of how you run the COE, there are mechanics of how you do the marketing, how you do the presentation, but the most important thing is to do what you're doing and show it and they will come, build it and they will come type of stuff. Just if you haven't got a good PR marketing person in your little team, find one.